Good morning. Our person of interest today on Mainline TV is Father Jeremy Hiers, O.S.A., that's the Order of St. Augustine. Father is the Director of Vocations and Director of the Office for Peace and Justice for the province of St. Thomas of Villanova. Father is here today to tell us about his journey to the priesthood. Good morning, Father, and
Morning.
Thank you for taking the time to join us on Mainline TV.
Absolutely.
I guess the first question I want to ask you is, where did you grow up?
So I grew up most of my childhood in northern Kentucky, which is basically a suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio. Kind of a Cincinnati kid. Grew up and went there until it was time to move after college.
Did your parents, did they have vocations, or were they mom and dad's? Dad worked, mom stayed home, or?
Yeah, both my parents worked throughout my childhood. My dad was a machinist, retired now, and my mom did various jobs, mostly in the accounting arena.
And when you said northern Kentucky's suburb of Cincinnati, is that where you went to school in Cincinnati? High school, undergraduate, whatever?
I went to school in northern Kentucky. That's where all the way through high school, and then I went to Thomas More College, which is also in northern Kentucky, literally just across the river from Cincinnati.
Thomas More College, tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's a small liberal arts school. It's now a university, just became a university a couple years ago, a diocesan college, and I studied computer information systems and math while there.
Diocesan, you mean Catholic?
Correct.
Okay, but you weren't Catholic?
No.
Okay, we'll get to that though. We have to have intrigue. You have any siblings?
Yes, I have had two younger brothers. One's deceased and an older sister.
Was he younger than you?
Yes.
And he passed away?
He passed away at around the age of 25, about almost 10 years ago.
That's a shame. Sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's part of the journey.
Did you always want to be a priest?
No, in fact, it's kind of ironic. I'm the only Catholic in my family today. So I never really, growing up, I never thought I'd be a priest, or let alone an Augustinian friar.
What religion were you familiar with?
So growing up, I sort of had this mixture of Lutheran and Baptist influence, and maybe a little Methodist. My grandmother was Methodist, very religious and devout. And growing up, we went to Sunday school at a Lutheran church down the street from where we lived. And so I really had sort of both of the Protestant influences in my early life.
After college, what did you do?
So after college, graduating with a degree in computer information systems and math, I moved to D.C. to start a career with the U.S. Army as a civilian. I wanted to get into the military as a young kid. I had an uncle who rose the ranks to a 2-star admiral, and I always looked up to him, so I always kind of pictured myself in this role of service to my country, and was medically disqualified, so being a civilian was sort of the next best path for me.
What did you specifically do in the Army?
So I worked in acquisitions. So basically, in shorthand, my job was to sort of assess what the Army needed on the battlefield and bring that to D.C. for contractors to build it, make it, program it. So I was in project management, program management, and acquisitions.
Did you have, were you like a GS rating?
Yeah.
What would that be? Was it high?
So when I entered the order, I was the equivalent of a GS-15.
When you entered the order?
Yeah, as I left my career and entered the order, I was a GS-15. And I started as a GS-7, I think, rose my way up to GS-15.
You were employed as a GS-7. Mm-hmm. And then, did you have a budget?
A budget for
when you were in the Army?
Yeah, for the programs I worked in. Yeah, the last program that I was working when I left the Army was, I think, around $220 million.
$220 million?
Yeah, was the total budget for that particular program.
And you would buy equipment that was used like in a battlefield?
We would write, contracts that would deploy mostly IT systems supporting various processes in those areas.
Did you see a lot of waste in the government?
No, it's you certainly have sort of the audits, you have the processes. So I did not personally witness waste.
Did, how long did you work and where was your office?
So my main office was at Fort Belvoir, and
Where is that?
But it's just south of the Pentagon, maybe about 20 minutes drive. And I also worked in Crystal City, but everything was sort of centered around the Pentagon, which is where my leadership worked and where I had a lot of my interface with some of the other parts of the Department of Defense I worked with.
Did you have security clearance?
Yes.
Was it high?
No, it was enough to do what I needed to do.
Were you ever suspicious that they were watching you?
No.
You never felt your phones were bugged or?
No.
No?
None of that.
You were straight with that.
Yeah.
And how long? So anyway, did I ask you how long that you did work for the government?
Yeah, so it was about 13 years.
Really?
Yeah, so I moved into DC in 2003, and I joined the order in 2015.
You joined the Order of Augustinians?
Yeah, the Order of St. Augustine.
So while you were still in the Pentagon, you became a priest?
I was discerning towards the latter part of my career with the Army. That's when I started to feel sort of this draw to become an Augustinian. But I would become a priest about 7 years later after I entered the order. I was ordained in 2021.
So if I'm hearing you, you had a devout Methodist grandmother, and you're, I'm going to say, raised partially Baptist and partially Lutheran. How did becoming a Catholic become part of what this is?
I knew eventually you'd get to that question because.
I saved it.
Yeah, exactly. Because usually I just say I'm the only Catholic in my family, and then that triggers, oh, how'd that happen? You know, the shorthand answer I always give is I just could not get away from good Catholics. My neighborhood growing up was heavily Catholic, so I always saw my friends, my playmates. I would see them and their families go to Mass. I would see their devotion during the seasons of Lent and Advent and things like abstaining from meat. And that really just always sparked a curiosity in my mind, especially when they would go to like a private school. I went to a public school. The curiosity was always there. And then after high school, or towards the end of high school, I tried to enter the military, as I explained, but was medically disqualified.
Right.
So I started to apply for colleges, and I ended up getting a great scholarship from Thomas More College at that time, and
Which
was a wonderful deal. And so I was like, I'm taking that. I'm going to a Catholic school, even though I'm not Catholic. And as part of that. That process of going to a Catholic liberal arts school is you have to take theology, so as part of the core curriculum. So I took 9 credits of theology, and that's when I really started to study what the Catholic faith's about. We would read encyclicals, church documents on social doctrine and certain teachings, and it really, a certain level of fascination started to envelop, and I really started to see the goodness of the Catholic faith. And I always remember kind of being that pain-in-the-butt student to my theology professor. I would ask lots of questions and sort of pose challenges because of my Protestant upbringing. And he was so patient with my questions that, that always resonated with me. And I would see the students go to Mass. I would see religious sisters in the chapel praying in the morning. And all those images just collected in my mind. And so after that, I moved to DC, and a lot of my friends ended up being Catholic. And I started going to Mass with some of them. And the parish that I went to, Nativity Parish in Burke, Virginia, the priest there were just phenomenal, and the preaching was wonderful, that I just stopped going to a Protestant church and going there.
You mean to a Lutheran or a Methodist church?
Yeah, I went to a Baptist church that
Baptist,
first one.
I left them out. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's in my mix of things that I've been exposed to. But I stopped going to the Baptist church and just started going to Catholic Mass. And after several years of going to Mass and not being able to receive communion, you know, my friends finally said, "Do you think it's time for O.S.A, or what was then RCIA?" And that's when I entered into the RCIA process. I was about 29 at that time, so I guess that would put me in living in D.C. for about 6 years at that point. And
you're still working for the government.
And I'm still working for the government. Yeah. And so I become Catholic at the age of 29. I'm received into the church in 2009. Start to get involved, start to teach CCD, and you know, I'm still single at that point. I didn't really feel this draw to marriage, and had bought a house around that time and thought I was settled, but then I really started to fall in love with ministry, outreach to the poor, teaching CCD, religious education.
That was like your calling.
And I started to feel like this tension between my career and going to church. I didn't know, I really loved my career with the Army, and I was really having a lot of fun and finding fulfillment, but I also was starting to feel this love for the church. And so I guess about 4 years after I had become Catholic, so I'm about 33, 34 at this time, people just start making a suggestion that might I think about religious life. You know, I was still single, but I was, you know, they saw my dedication, they saw my passion for the faith, and that's when I really started to think, well, maybe I am. Maybe I should, you know, consider it. And so I did. And then one day after Mass, in around the 2014 time frame, I picked up this little autobiography by chance of St. Augustine. I had no idea who he was. I really hadn't read his life, and I read how he was a civil servant at the age of 33, and I was around that age, a civil servant, and I said, I think this saint gets me, maybe I should reach out to the Order of St. Augustine. And so it was at that point that I did, and I just felt pretty quickly that the Augustinians were where I was called, and so I said, well, I'll enter the process and see what happens. So I sold the house, the car, a lot of my belongings, and entered in 2015.
You didn't just choose to be a Catholic. Being Lutheran, you actually went on the side of the guy who had some odds with him, Martin Luther. So you didn't just become a Catholic. You became almost like there was like an issue between Martin Luther and the church. And you become an Augustinian, because he was an Augustinian priest, right?
Yeah.
But was he beyond a priest, or just, did he rise to what, like a bishop, or was he just a priest? I don't want to say just.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I actually don't know.
Yeah, I was going to bring the Luther book with me. So how did your family respond? I mean, you have this devout Methodist grandmother, and you've got the Baptist and the Lutheran, and now you're becoming an Augustinian priest. How did they respond to that?
Yeah, they were nothing but supportive.
Really?
They were curious. They had a lot of questions.
Oh, sure.
But I think, you know, my family, they love me, they support me. And so when I told them I'd become Catholic, when I told them I was going to be an Augustinian, I received nothing but support.
Did you just make like a general announcement, like at Thanksgiving?
I made some personal phone calls first, and then the word spread pretty quickly. Called my parents, called my brother, you know, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You just weren't going to walk in the door on Christmas Eve and with robes on and say, oh, guess what?
Here I am, yeah.
Here, I'm the new guy.
If I could time travel back, I might try that just to see their reaction.
Is your grandmother still alive?
No, she's deceased.
Did she die happy, though? That you were at least, I mean, it's a devout Methodist. They don't dance or anything, do they? Methodists?
Yes, she had some pretty strict, lifestyle choices. She had died before I made this decision.
You escaped that.
Yeah. So, but I'm sure, being the loving grandmother that she was, that she would be.
She would have been okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So these are questions that I'm curious about. Did you have to get rebaptized as a Catholic?
No.
How about confirmed?
You do get confirmed when you're received into the Catholic Church.
I know were you confirmed as a Lutheran?
So I was baptized in a Baptist church
Okay.
at the age of 17. So a little later in life, I went to Sunday school, but in my tradition, and sort of what I was taught, you're baptized as an adult. But as long as you're baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as a Christian, you don't have to be rebaptized when you come into the Catholic Church. But you are confirmed at the Easter Vigil.
All right, so I was just wondering that about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? It doesn't sound like you did, but I'll ask you anyway. Did you become disillusioned with the military?
Disillusion, what do you mean by that?
Well, you said you were happy, but you were just more like you were pulled closer to a religious order than you were with staying with the government and working. Because I didn't expect you to say that you were like you were real happy and you were okay with the military life.
Yeah.
So you didn't say that, so I figured, well, you're okay with moving on from it. You weren't disillusioned with the government or the Army or anything.
I think the Army actually helped me develop a thirst for ministry, because as I rose up in leadership positions, when you're a supervisor and then a leader of an organization, care of the people is a key leadership quality for the Army, caring for those entrusted to you under your leadership. And so the higher I went, the more my job was about caring for the employees and the contractors and so forth. And as I did that, I started to feel this draw towards, really being present to people, especially when they're suffering or struggling, or helping them find the best in themselves. And I remember a very kind of significant moment was actually when I was overseas in a combat zone and sleeping sort of in this tent with, or living in this tent with, several dozens of other soldiers and civilians alike. And some of the young civilians who are 18 or 19 over there kind of adjusting to that reality.
The American Army? Okay. Or Marines, whatever.
It may have been joint. I think there were some people from different branches.
Can you say what combat zone it was?
I prefer not to.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's good. Good question. But I just sort of really just enjoyed just listening to them, and sort of just being present to them in that kind of scary, tough moment of their life.
Were you scared?
I was, yeah. I was, I think at that time, my faith was really starting to rise. So I had faith, but it wasn't, certainly I didn't feel safe. I have to say that.
You were there for a while?
So I took several trips over. So I was there usually for 1 or 2 increments at a time.
What would you do? Survey what the needs were of the how did you feel about combat? I mean, I know myself that there's in religious teaching there is something called a just war. What was your feelings about that?
Yeah, I think even today I'm still developing sort of my own perspective in accord with our church teaching. Because there's a reality to it that, we wish didn't exist. And so certainly when I was over there, and I would even see the impoverished people impacted by the war outside of the military gates, my heart would really sense this, I guess the sense of this is an unfortunate and unnecessary reality of the human condition. That we have to work for peace. We have to work for ways to solve issues nonviolently, and that's where I really got a strong conviction for it, I believe.
I'll put you a little bit on the spot only because you brought up a combat zone. Do you have? I know every week that we hear in Mass about praying for peace, and specific locations are pointed out: Gaza, Ukraine. You're not only just a priest, but you're a quasi-military person who actually experienced a combat zone. Do you think about Israel and the Ukraine? Do you have any thoughts on that you can say comfortably, that you feel to talk about?
Nothing in terms of what the solution is in particular, but what I know from my experience in the military is the issues are deeper than what the general public would know. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, there's a lot of discussions, and if it was simple, it would be solved. And our priority should always be to eliminate human suffering and to uphold human dignity, and to the greatest way possible. And that's what my prayer for both sides of these conflicts is that they would see the human person that has nothing to do with the conflict, that's suffering as a result, and preservation of life and protection of their dignity, and should be the topmost priority for any person of goodwill.
I will say I admire and respect, having interviewed a number of people that were in situations like yourself, and I admire and respect the fact that you're not really specific about it, and I know you know a lot more than you're telling me here today, and that's fine. And as I say, I admire and respect that. That's very admirable. But it's just my job to ask.
Sure, yeah.
How did you get to Villanova? And let's talk about your job.
My job.
Your current jobs.
Yeah. So I was ordained in 2021, and my first assignment was working at the National Shrine of St. Rita of Cascia in South Philly. And I also did work at St. Paul's, one of our parishes down the street from there. And I did a variety of different ministries. And when our new provincial, Father Rob Hagan, came on board...
He's a good story.
Yes, he
I
is.
interviewed him.
Absolutely.
Had a house and a car.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he and I have similar backgrounds.
And a practicing defense lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've shared stories, from both of our stories and how they relate. And so after sort of, when he came on, I had been down in South Philly for about 3 years, and our then Justice and Peace Director, Father Jack Deegan, was retiring. And Father Rob knows that I have a passion for social justice, a lot of which was formed during my time in college and with the military.
Sure.
And so he asked if I would take that role, and then shortly after he asked if I would also take on the role of vocations director, or being the recruiter, to put it in military terms, for the Augustinians. And sort of the logic of putting those two together is that, young people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves in the world today. And we have a lot of wonderful ministries where we have direct outreach to the poor and marginalized. And so the idea was, as we tell our story and promote the ministries of serving the marginalized, we can also promote vocations to our way of life. Because we have a number of apostolates as Augustinians. So that was sort of the logic of bringing the two together. And so I really love talking about our ministries when I'm talking about young guys that are like I was, in my early career, thinking maybe I'm called to religious life. I can talk about the many ways that we serve as Augustinians.
Do you just serve exclusively on the campus?
No. So my sort of territory, so we have 3 provinces in the United States of America. We have the East Coast province, we have the Midwest, and we have the California province. And there's a vocation director for each of those regions. So I like to say my office is technically the East Coast of the United States of America, because I travel up and down to promote vocations to our way of life. I go and visit young men who are thinking about our way of life, and other trips.
When you say, how does that come about? Like people make inquiries like you did, like picking up the little pamphlet on St. Augustine and reading about his life, which was kind of interesting, and his life of service, and then you go and pursue that.
Yes, so there's, I guess, maybe 2 main avenues of, actually 3 ways that guys find us. One is through our existing ministries. They were a student in one of our schools. They served at one of our ministries, like our parishes. And then the second is conferences. So we go to conferences where young adults are present. We have a table. We hand out stuff. We're there to talk to young men, and they contact us or follow up with us. And then the third is social media, online website, beafriar.org. That's been a huge funnel for us because that's where they are. They're online. So they'll get a social media ad pop up and they'll say, oh, that resonates with me. So they'll click to send their contact, or they'll stumble upon beafriar.org through a promotional material or a Google search, and then reach out to us through that.
I guess, we have to talk about your now most famous Augustinian brother. Were you surprised that the Pope was American, number one, and number two went to Villanova?
Yeah, I guess.
Did you have a premonition?
We sort of had a gut instinct it could happen. One of my memories that stuck in my mind was throughout the time he was cardinal was my undergrad theology professor kind of making the statement, we'll probably never see an American pope. And he listed some of the good reasons to make that presumption. However, when Cardinal Prevost when he was made cardinal, we suspected, well, it could happen. And during the conclave, I just sort of had this feeling, for a number of reasons, that it could be him. I know his heart. I know something about where our church is today. I know the relevance of our Augustinian values. So I was maybe a little surprised, but I wasn't shocked, if that makes sense. Right. Like, I could almost see him walking out on the balcony. And even his opening remarks just resonated so much with what I thought or imagined he might say, bringing our Augustinian spirituality into it.
Do you envision him coming to Villanova someday?
Well, that's certainly the hope. Yeah.
Is that in the plans?
There are no plans that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I've heard from local police forces that they're already planning for that possibility that could happen.
That wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Yeah. Are you a basketball fan?
Marginally. Yeah.
The Nova Knicks? Are you following the Knicks? The
no.
Three guys from Villanova on the team? No? Okay. Vegas had a betting pool for the first time in ever, betting on who the new pope would be. Which, I guess it was supposed to be an Italian. Did you? It wasn't though. Did you watch the Conclave?
The movie?
And the two popes?
I did. Yeah, I've seen both.
Any thoughts on either of them?
The Conclave I thought was interesting in that it kind of opened our imagination to sort of what could happen, given sort of the process. But we all know it's a very secretive process. And, and certainly the ending of the movie is something I didn't resonate with. But it was neat just to see sort of what some of the dynamics would be. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody that was actually a member of the conclave, meaning one of the cardinals, wouldn't come out and say that's not how it works. So I think it's purely speculative. It would be my personal estimation.
Do you think that, I guess this is redundant. Do you think it was accurate?
No, I don't think, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. You're not privileged to know what goes on in the room.
But I wouldn't suspect it is.
Yeah, I don't know if there were any critics that challenged the film. I didn't read all the critics. It was the movie was well received though. How about the two popes?
Two popes I thought was interesting, but again, how do we really know?
Yeah.
Maybe. I didn't do a lot of research on it personally, so I don't know what sort of records or whatever information they would have relied on. But if I remember the dynamics of the movie, it's been a while since I've seen it. It kind of brought hope that the two popes were really, sort of collaborative.
There were always rumors that they didn't really get along.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
Do you and your brothers, did you watch the movie with any of your brothers?
Augustinian brothers?
Yeah.
I saw Conclave. Two popes I saw by myself, but Conclave I watched it with a couple of Augustinian brothers.
So do you sit there and no, that didn't happen. No, that's not true. I don't believe that. Is that?
Well, it was great going out to dinner afterwards and talking about it. And certainly we had our debates about, who may have been represented in the movie and not and such.
Well, our time is about up. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't touch on?
No, I really want to thank you for the opportunity. St. Augustine, we have our Augustinian spirituality because St. Augustine shared his story. He felt he had a story to share, and he shared it. And from that has emerged so many church documents, so much of what we understand about the faith today. And so I'm grateful for anybody that allows somebody to share their story in a faith-based context. Because my story matters, and your story matters, and every person you interview, their story matters. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our story, especially in an Augustinian kind of context.
Well, thank you. And you're a very interesting brother, priest. Your story was certainly fascinating to me, and I'm sure the audience would find the same thing fascinating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
And thank you for the time. With my producer, Kevin, this is John Ricciutti from MainlineTV.org. And until next time, with a person of interest. And have a good day.